Next up, we have Jordan Williams from the New Zealand Taxpayers Union. Welcome, Jordan.
Well, it's not very often a Kiwi gets to say this, but you really are the best show in town because the Warriors just beat the Roosters, which I don't think I've ever been in Australia where Warriors have actually won a game, but yeah, what's this? Very good. All right, so Tim Andrews asked me to come and present to you on a Sunday afternoon and give you a comparative analysis of the New Zealand tax system vis-a-vis the Australian tax system. And I can't think of anything more exciting than dealing with that before you. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes doing that, but then I'm actually going to get into what I'm passionate about, and I hope that as libertarians we are too, and that is selling that message. How do we make sure that other people are as excited about as us, or as angry as we are about the ridiculous amounts government take from us, and whether that is fair? You may even get a video if we have time, and at the end, if you do want to talk about the New Zealand political environment, we've got an election now in less than 6 months' time. Obviously, the Brits have now gotten and beaten us to it, but we're in a post-John Key environment and with an electoral system that makes every government, since we've had it, a minority government in a very close race. So, firstly, we beat you to the GST. We're very fortunate that we have almost no exceptions, and we, as a Kiwi, we're very proud of this. And I was having a look, I was amazed I had to download a PDF just for the list of basic foods that are exempt from GST and those ones that aren't. And I've just highlighted that as a lawyer, whenever you see in official guidance the words some or by certain operators, it seems even the summary just points to the extent of complication in your system. But of course, having lots of exceptions, at least we're not as bad as the Brits or some countries where we've got different rates. At least it's a in or out system. For us, it is simply financial services and residential properties, or renting residential properties, and the metals. But on to the more important fight we're most concerned about, because from an economic perspective, we prefer the GST value-added taxes. This is where the vast majority of our work is focused on, because it's the income tax where we've got the higher economic cost in terms of the inefficiencies and the effects on decision making. And you'll see here in the the Australian gold, your marginal tax rates, and in the stunning black, the New Zealand equivalent. So we don't have the tax-free threshold. That's probably in fact, as part of next month's budget, it's almost certain there's going to be some sort of tax package in it, and that is one of 5 models this is the plug for our latest report, but it is one of the 5 models on how you might spend the $3 billion that we're pushing for tax relief in it. But you'll see also that, of course, the extent to which that marginal rate hits the high income earners is obviously a lot higher in Australia. But just to point out that where our top rate kicks in is only about $5,000 more than the average income earner. So it kicks in very, very low. This is a document that is very similar to what Robert was talking about here in Australia. The top, correct me if I'm wrong, top 1% paying 17%. This is the equivalent here. And we find, as much as the left complain again about the rich pricks not paying their fair share, we have in New Zealand the top 17% paying 60% of the income tax, or put it another way, the top 8% of New Zealand income earners paying 40% of the burden. There is on the lower end, there's some effects with, we've got a complicated tax credit system, which I'm going to leave that aside unless someone wants to get into in the Q&A, but this does factor that in. So, based on the attention of the audience, the lesson I actually want to message number one, is that taking this on, and this is our ultimate, failure or measure of success, is the extent to which, as a centre-right government in power since 2008, to what extent have they actually matched their rhetoric about being a low-tax government versus simply the default of spending more and more of other people's money. And this is our new Prime Minister, Bill English, but had been the Minister of Finance. In fact, the National Party had cancelled more tax cuts than they had actually implemented because, of course, after the election, and it's a little bit like getting back to surplus. It's always in a few years' time, isn't it? So our main objective, obviously, is to reduce the size of that tax burden. But we actually seldom talk about tax because for our supporters, of course, we light our hair on fire about talking about tax, but the average member of the public doesn't. So our business model is focused on the other side of the equation, which is spending. Because for the vast majority of the public, they're not going to demand tax cuts for any sort of ideological or theoretical reason. It's because that we have convinced them of this really radical idea that you and I spend our money better than those bastards in Canberra or Wellington or down at the local town hall. And the way we do that is by highlighting wasteful or silly expenditure in the way that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the British Taxpayers Alliance, Tim, and I want to make a mention of the wonderful, and it occurred up until 2015, the Waste Watch program that CIS conducted, of focusing not at the huge pieces of public policy that we can't get in the media about, but things like that $150,000 television screen you can see behind our mascot and I, giving them an award. And this, and I love this one. It's only $250,000. But this leaflet on the side, it's called No Car, No Problem. And it was produced by the good people at the Ministry of Senior Citizens in New Zealand. And it, as I say, $250,000 on this. And it was for doctors to give patients when they removed their licence from them because they got too old. And the point of the leaflet, and I'm not exaggerating here, is to explain options once you lose your driver's licence. And it included a list. Take buses. Get a taxi. Have friends and family drop you places. So at the very time your life is changing, you lose your licence, thank God the government is there to patronise you at the same time. And this went bananas. You know, I mean, it's a real hit and miss, this job. You just don't know what's really going to take off. But this was one of them, and we got lots of talk about media of it. There were, as you can imagine, the shock jocks read it aloud. You know, great public service there. I mentioned the Waste Watch there. So it was part of, when CIS did it, it was part of a much broader campaign which, yes, they talked about the rats and mice, but it was actually the foundation of a campaign which was we need to get government under 30% of GDP. So I'm sure sometimes when you hear Tim Andrews on the radio complaining about examples, MPs' pay. I mean, as a taxpayer advocate, I hate talking about MPs' pay. You guys know it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter. We'd much rather probably have a Singapore model where you pay loads and actually get very good people. But nothing drives traffic to our website and talkback radio like MPs' pay, and it reminds people of that ultimate message that you spend your money better than they do. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the woman there, I have her name somewhere, Bev Oda. I constantly are telling my staff and interns that, that we're looking for the $16 glass of orange juice. This woman she's a federal minister, or was a federal minister in the Canadian government in Canada, was on a official trip to DC, turned up in DC, the hotel wasn't good enough, forced her staff to go and book another one, and at the new hotel, when they got the receipt, she'd ordered a $16 glass of orange juice. Now that $16 glass of orange juice, which is exposed by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, absolutely dogged her. And 6 months later, she eventually resigned, and among it was the regret of the $16 glass of orange juice. So again, we've heard wonderful speakers over the weekend about meaty economic issues and public policy, and that's really important. But politics is emotion. And that, whether it's the leaflet, an enormous TV, another one we exposed that got a huge amount of coverage was hair straighteners for staff in a government department in their toilets. It just went like, people were they don't know it was us, even the Taxpayers Union, but the vast majority of New Zealanders have heard that story. So the message is that to further our cause around the size of government, let's talk less about the tax side and about the spending, because the two are inherently connected, and it's a heck of a lot easier to make the emotive argument around the spending side than the tax side. The second point I want to make is that as Western societies have made paying taxes a heck of a lot easier, and from an economic cost point of view, we actually often support measures that make or reduce the compliance costs of taxes. But there is a cost to that, because, for example, in New Zealand and Australia, I understand it's not quite this simple, but the vast majority of New Zealanders don't have any tax paperwork during the year. We don't file annual returns because if you're a salary or wage earner, it all comes out of PAYE, pay as you earn, it's deducted by your employer. So you simply, unless you're reading your pay slip, you're just not seeing that tax deducted. And one of the ideas that we're very keen on pushing, and we've actually got the Bankers Association on side, they tell us it's not technically difficult, is for anyone under 40, you probably don't open your pay slips. Your pay is simply what arrives in your bank account. And as far as we know, this hasn't been done anywhere in the world, but we want to, and it's regulation, it's a scary word, none of you are going to like me, but to require banks to have on your bank statement the gross amount, update the balance, and then take the deduction at the bank account level or at the internet banking level. The other thing we do is just that gentle reminder of how much that beast of the state is costing. I know that, I think it's CIS here do the tax freedom days. That's our other big push in this area, but if you do have any more ideas about how we give that gentle reminder about how much that beast is costing, I'd really welcome it. So without further ado, I think I'd rather leave time for questions rather than anything else. I'm sorry we did miss out on the video, but yeah, thank you.